We all come into the world with special talents. But just a few of us can realize our talents and shout our inner voice in the world. What are the common characteristics of people who flourished their talents? How to recognize talents and turn them into reality? And how can talents be turned into valuable achievements in life? Hello to all of you dear people around the world. Welcome to the Elixir of Awareness channel. The subject of our 6th episode is trying to find a way to answer these questions. And the title of this episode is a sign of genius.
Sometimes life's going to hit you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith. I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did. You've got to find what you love. And that is as true for work as it is for your lovers. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life. And the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking and don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking, don't settle. So keep looking, don't settle. So keep looking.
Clifton and Buckingham, the world's 2 greatest neuroscientists, surveyed 700,000 people over 15 years of study and came up with a theory about the formation of intelligence and its types, which is a very good introduction to the beginning of this episode. They talked to 700,000 people, and this research took years, and they finally came to 3 important principles. The first principle is that by examining different people, they realized that contrary to the limitations that our mind has on the interpretation of genius and intelligence, they recognized 34 different kinds of intelligence in humans. Contrary to what we think in school or society, intelligence isn't just the ability to solve a math problem or solve a complex puzzle. Intelligence can have different types. For example, they realized that even empathy is considered a type of intelligence. Yes, some people have a lot of empathy intelligence. This means that some people can perceive emotions very quickly and then respond quickly and can be said to be geniuses in empathic intelligence. Or, for example, in these studies they found that some people have very high adaptive intelligence. It means when conditions change, they're also very flexible and quickly adapt to new conditions. Some are organizers. That is to say, they can manage different issues well together and use different instruments well and beautifully together like an orchestra conductor, and as a result discover different, new and creative music. Some humans understand well, some are exceptional at analyzing problems, and some are futuristic. That is to say, they can predict something in the future and there, with the parameters in here and now. The second thing they learned was that no human being is a genius in all 34 types of intelligence. We are all imperfect in our own way. They understood many intelligences conflict with each other. For example, a person who has high empathic intelligence and cares about understanding others may not be a good organizer and can't get things done properly because people are their priority. It seems that being a genius in one intelligence sometimes comes at the cost of being weaker in another. And Clifton and Buckingham's third law, which is very important, is that by examining 700,000 people, they found that there's no human in the world who isn't a genius at least, in 5 of these 34 types of intelligence. It seems that this research has created a kind of revolution in the theories of intelligence and talent. So now we know that all humans are geniuses, but in a unique way. The important question that arises after understanding this issue is, what career path or field of study should we follow that matches our inherent talents and inner desires? There are a series of exercises that help us to listen to our inner voice and recognize it, then choose the right path of life based on that. One way is to review our childhood experiences. Childhood has an advantage, and that advantage is that we weren't worried about money and position in those days. It means that the reward for the work was not very important to us, and we were just looking to enjoy that activity. Therefore, examining and analyzing childhood experiences can bring us very close to the right answer. In the first step, think about what were the 3 things you really enjoyed doing as a child. What really made us not notice the passage of time and feel it with the speed of light? It means that suddenly we see that it's night, but we were immersed in doing that work for a long time and didn't notice the passage of time. The second step is to describe those activities on paper. Now we want you to listen to this relaxing music and think about this question. What did you enjoy doing the most as a child? The next step is to think about why you liked these activities. What was it about that activity that made you enjoy it? And after you understand why you like these things and what the common reasons are, you can implement the final step. And in the last step, we make the answers more general to get a relative description of your moods and emotions. For example, you may say that I'm someone who has loved order in the past. Or I'm the one who liked to make others happy. I'm the person who liked to communicate, or I'm the person who liked to always make something. This helps us to find that initial image to define our inner desires. To make our mental image clearer, right now as you're watching or listening to this episode. Just think about, what do you miss doing? What's exactly is that job that you say to yourself every day, I wish I'd that person's job? Think about whether this is your desire because of job and social benefits, or the reason you want to do that work is just your interest. This work can make the image of our tendencies more clear. Every work or every job has different aspects, each of which can involve a part of our mind and being. Now that we're thinking about discovering our innate talent and matching it with an activity or job in the surrounding world, it's good to talk a little about the common mistakes in this diagnosis. One of these common errors is what Alain de Botton refers to as errors in business inputs and outputs. You know, we mostly see the output of jobs, but we must remember that every scene has a backstage. For example, for acting to reach the highest possible level, it requires very hard and sometimes unbearable efforts. For a football player, or any other successful character. But usually we misidentify our favorite work for this reason, because we only see the stage and don't pay attention to the backstage. That is to say, we see the destination, but we don't see the difficulty and dangers of the path. We only see the achievements and outputs of that work. The inputs of that work and the things that led to the desired output are sometimes hidden from our view. Sometimes even the inputs of that job aren't compatible with our identity, and we don't like those prerequisite activities at all. So it's important to know what those successful people who work in our favorite job or field do during the day. So please examine the jobs you like with a critical eye on what prerequisites they've. What pleasures do those actions create for you, and what limitations do they entail for you? What rhythm, volume, and type of effort is needed to achieve the desired result? Another obstacle that can hinder our vision in finding the signs of our genius is the job framework of our family. In a major part of history, many people's jobs were automatically chosen based on their previous generation's jobs. For example, someone whose father was a farmer or a soldier would choose the same job. But at some point we found the freedom to find our favorite work outside the framework of our family's job. But how much can we really make a logical choice outside of this framework? We think very little. Because these frameworks still have their effects in most societies. Think about what's your family's job's framework. There are two scenarios here. One is that our family has a job that they're very biased and passionate about, and that's why they want us to choose their job. And another scenario is that they don't have that job and they want to do it. So they ask us to pick that job. In fact, sometimes they impose their unlived life, which is full of regret, on children. For example, because their parents aren't doctors and they're interested in medicine, they would like their child to become a doctor instead of them. Most of the job's frameworks that are imposed on children are sometimes the results of the lifestyles of our parents and their ancestors. That is to say, under the influence of the past lives of the grandparents. For example, in the past, in some societies, if people had a high degree, so they'd a better job. And if they wanted a better job, they should have a higher degree. And this was a value. At that time, when students are asked in school, "What does your father do?" which is a completely wrong question. Everyone was answering employee or self-employment. That is to say, all jobs were divided into these two types in the past. And in the past, most parents in those communities insisted on their children becoming employees due to fluctuations in freelance income, to benefit from a fixed salary with government benefits. For this reason, they wanted children to go to university and get a good degree to be employed by the government. While some freelance jobs can provide financial freedom in a shorter period. This shows that maybe these recommendations were appropriate in the time of our parents, but may not be appropriate for our time. Because with the progress of science and industry, our world changes every day and new job opportunities are created. But subconsciously, because we love our parents, we sometimes give in to their wishes and choose a job approved and liked by them. While maybe that job conflicts with our dreams, interests, and talents. Now we want to do some mental exercises and see if the job we think is our mission is really our heart's desire, or not. Our choice is formed only under the influence of our parents' expectations. For this exercise, we have to take a few steps with each other. So pay attention to these questions and think about their answers. First, make a list of jobs that are familiar to you, like what your friends and family do. In the next step, think about those jobs that are outside the scope of your family and friends' jobs. For example, a person may live in a family where most of them are employees in different government departments, and in the second step, they thinks about jobs that are outside the framework of those jobs, for example, a chef or a mechanic. So think about which jobs are outside the experience and expectations of your group of friends and family. The third step is to think about whether our family, with all the love they for us, impose their regrets and unlived life on us or not. Aren't we unconsciously pressured to do what they like because of our interest in them? And when we answer these questions, sometimes we realize that we're lucky because we understand that the work or field of study that our parents are interested in is also compatible with our personal talent and interest. Of course, sometimes it isn't like that, and we aren't so lucky. So, in the last step, let's think that if this unlived life is imposed on us by our parents, is it really compatible with our inner desire or not? Sometimes the influence of parents on our job isn't caused by their unlived life but by their lived life. For example, they experienced a job that was too difficult and dangerous for them, boring, or lacked interest and excitement. For this reason, they may prohibit us from doing those jobs. But it may be a different experience for us, and that job just was not suitable for the time of parents. Maybe they weren't learned well, and they didn't follow a good path, and maybe they didn't like that job. Another concept that exists is a concept called ownership error. For example, we may have chosen a field of study, and we also feel that we don't like this field either, but the factor that makes us continue despite the bad feeling is the ownership error. In the error of ownership, we say to ourselves that you spent some money to get to this stage, for example, time, money, and of course energy, and that's why it's a shame and you shouldn't change your major. This is an ownership error. One point that exists is the possibility of experiencing jobs that we think are suitable for us. We never know if a job is right for us or not, until we do it and experience it in reality. In some German schools, for example, in technical and vocational schools, students are introduced to different companies 2 days a week so that they've the opportunity to experience new jobs. Even they receive a percentage of the salary. This mechanism makes students get to know several different jobs in a practical way during high school. They see closely, touch, and based on this experience, they decide what job is compatible with their mood and interest. Many of us may have talents, but because we've never experienced them in the form of work, we're unaware of the existence of those talents. Therefore, it's very important to experience many things in which we feel that we've talent, and then make a decision about it. Discovering talents happens by trying different activities. Sometimes a skill we learn elsewhere can help us in an unrelated field. For example, if we look at the moon with Galileo's telescope, we won't see a clear image, but Galileo was the first person to draw a clear map of the moon and its details. But this work was not possible only with the help of telescope and astronomy. What helped Galileo was his ability and talent in painting. He was very skilled in painting, and therefore by looking at the moon he could imagine and paint its details from the eyes of a painter. So we conclude that trying different jobs in different fields can help us to be more effective in our main job. Discovery of inherent talent doesn't happen in a moment. It's a kind of lifestyle. It means that we should focus on that talent gradually and spend more time and invest so that it becomes our main priority. Mr. Adam Grant, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, describes a very interesting experience in his book titled Originals. He goes to the geniuses, that is, those who were born geniuses. For example, children who at the age of 4 were fluent in several other languages in addition to their mother tongue, could either play the violin with the best possible quality, or read difficult books at the age of 5, or solve difficult math problems. He investigated whether those geniuses were able to achieve the value of their genius in adulthood. And were they able to reach the highest degrees? And then he comes to a very strange and shocking answer. Most of them no. Children who are born gifted and have a special, unique, and strange talent most of the time cannot use that talent to the same quality in old age. But why? Dr. Adam Grant explains that the reason that these genius children achieve less than normal children in adulthood is that they'd less breadth of experience. When a child is diagnosed as a genius, a pre-prepared and predicted growth path is considered for them. For example, when they see that they has great talent in mathematics, they quickly provide them with many books. In fact, they take the permission of a child's life and real and diverse experiences from them. Because they thinks if they're a genius, so they should only focus on their genius. Professor Adam Grant says that this is the only reason why most of these children can't show their genius in practice at an older age, because they only focus on limited experiences. While normal children are allowed to experience and reflect on their surroundings and society. Innate talent is the result of an experience that is real and happened in different environments. We can't discover our talent only with personality tests. Personality tests provide us with options that we're more likely to be interested in according to our personality type. But from a point on, we've to experience those options in reality. Let's talk about another theory about career choice, which in my opinion is a very realistic theory and of course idealistic. A man named Collins has drawn a triangle in which there's a concept at each vertex. If we pay attention to all three concepts of this triangle, we've a choice that is both realistic and idealistic. Imagine a triangle in your mind or draw it on paper and write at the top of it, interest. This is the first parameter that we should consider to find our favorite work. At another vertex, write talent. Interest is very different from talent because we may be interested in something but not talented in that work. For example, we love to act, but we don't have the talent to be an actor. But sometimes we're lucky. That is, our interest coincides with our talent. But how do we evaluate talent? Just in doing that work, and with the feedback we get from the environment and others. We feel the interest inside, but the talent is different, and it shows itself only in the reality scene. Mr. Collins says first find your interests, then when you've a series of choices, go and do them, and then ask those who are engaged in that activity, if there's any special ability in me about that activity that you can recognize, please tell to me. The third vertex of the Collins triangle is the condition. Consider a person who loves forestry and has a talent for forestry, but lives in Saudi Arabia. They're interested, and they has talent, but the condition isn't good. Collins says that if there's a job that we're very interested in and according to others, we're talented in it, and the condition of doing that job is also suitable, then that job is exactly what's suitable for us. Another very important point is that Mr. Collins says that sometimes the condition isn't suitable for doing something now, but we've so much interest and talent that we can change the condition. It means that sometimes conditions aren't less important than interest and talent. Now we want you to ask yourself if there's something in your mind that you're very interested in, and you've a lot of talent in it, and the condition is suitable for doing it. Regarding the parameters of the condition, an important point is the surprising effect of culture on the emergence of the genius of people in society. Think a little about history and geniuses. For example, we know that Newton definitely was a genius. But there's a question why we're witnessing the emergence of geniuses during his time, but why we don't see a person like Newton about 10 centuries before him. If we consider the possibilities, many babies were born who could be genius like Newton. But here is the point of the influence of cultural condition on the formation of geniuses. Genius isn't just an individual thing, but it can be collective. In some periods of history, we see many philosophers and scientists in society, but in another period of history, we live in complete silence, and it seems that no talented and genius person emerges. This doesn't mean that talented people weren't born in that generation, because geniuses and unique talents are born in every generation. But the point is that cultural, social, political, and economic conditions can also be effective in the formation of human genius. So, it's better to examine the issue from a social point of view. The question that exists is how cultural, social, political, and economic condition in the society in which we live are necessary for the cultivation of human genius. Some societies are short-term, which means that it can't be predicted. In any part of this world where you live, think about whether I can imagine the conditions of myself and my surroundings 1 year from now. Some other societies are long-term, that is to say, they're like highways. People can see 1 or more years or 10 years ahead and plan for those years. For example, a person in a long-term society can plan well for their field of study and their future career and imagine their condition in the future. Now think about whether the society you live in is long-term and predictable or short-term and unpredictable. Or rather, is your society like a freeway with a clear destination or a winding road with an unknown destination? This is a very important point, that if we live in a short-term society that is constantly involved in crisis and can't be predicted, it makes our genius unable to flourish. The seed of talent grows in soil that is stable. And a short-term society is a dreamless and unstable society because people don't have time to think about their dreams. People in a short-term society are more concerned with survival. They're usually angry and there's no opportunity to develop their genius. And also, they don't have the possibility to reach their maximum capacity because society doesn't invest enough in them. A short-term society is an illiterate society because people don't pay attention to a piece of knowledge or a specific field and don't have enough focus for planning. In this type of society, real knowledge isn't produced, and if people study at the university, it's only for the sake of getting a degree and earning job points. So genius is a collective factor. But there is an important point. If we live in any type of these societies, we must do our best to achieve our dreams and goals. Because we only live once on this planet, and our dreams are worth striving for. So the chaotic condition of society shouldn't discourage us. If we listen to our inner voice even a little, our level of satisfaction with life will increase. Another question about genius is how much influence genes and experiences in the development of our talents. The answer is both. It means that both genetics and our efforts and experiences in life are very important for building talents. Nietzsche says that we're mostly involved in a school of thought that shows geniuses as if they've a unique and magical quality. And this makes us not even compare ourselves with them. And as a result, we don't make any effort to compete. That is to say, this absolute genetic view of genius makes us stop trying to grow and flourish our talents. But in addition to genetics being very important, experiences are also very influential. This means that genius is often not found but made. A person may be born with a special and unique talent, but because they don't practice and work, their talent fades and disappears over time. And maybe another person is born with average talent, but with stubbornness can achieve much better results than others. Life is like a game of passer. Each of us is dealt cards, but what's decisive is the way we play with the cards in our hands. It means experience plus genetics, more important than IQ, which is a genetic factor. The reason for people's success in their work is the continuation of motivation. Our genes can change and adapt to new conditions under the influence of our efforts and experiences. Sometimes a specific gene can be activated in us, and sometimes a gene can never be activated in us, and this depends on our effort, motivation, and perseverance. For example, they checked the average height of soldiers in England over 150 years. They realized that their average was 165 cm before, while now it's 180 cm. The reason for that is the advancement of medical science and the improvement of nutrition and living condition. This research proves that even genetics can change under the influence of time and condition. so experience and condition can be very important. In another study, Dr. Carl Dweck, professor of psychology at Stanford University, has a book titled Mindset. He explains that we've two types of attitudes. One is a fixed attitude and the other is a growth attitude. In the fixed attitude, we consider people and their characteristics as unchangeable and fixed, genetic and permanent. But from Dr. Dweck's point of view, human traits can be changed, influenced by the environment, temporarily, and can be improved. He says that environmental inputs affect their activation. Which attitude we choose has a direct impact on our whole life and is very important. From the point of view of fixed attitude, we believe that now that intelligence is something fixed, we must constantly prove our intelligence to others. For example, employees of a company or students of a class constantly try to look smart. But from the point of view of growth attitude, our abilities can be changed, and the important issue isn't proving our intelligence to others, but continuous learning. In the fixed attitude, failure is a sign of disaster, because we think that we aren't naturally intelligent. But in the growth attitude, failure can be a factor of growth and help us become better. In a fixed attitude, effort isn't a good thing, because when we aren't smart, we need to try. But in the attitude of growth, effort is everything and effort makes us smart and talented. In the growth attitude, the world isn't divided into weak and strong, successful and failed, intelligent and unintelligent. Rather, the world is divided into two parts, one group of learners and the other group of non-learners. Interestingly, we aren't afraid of failure as children, for example. We learn to sit, walk, and talk with all kinds of failures and many tries. But when we grow older, the environment gradually teaches us fixed thinking, and we feel that failure is equivalent to our incompetence and lack of intelligence. In thinking of growth, intelligence is something that you're born with, and we should try to increase it. But fixed thinking sees IQ as a fixed number that is different for each person and measures you once and for all and affects your destiny forever. But in the attitude of growth, intelligence is very diverse and changeable. But in fixed thinking, if we fail, we think that we're a failure. But in growth thinking, failure is a positive feedback and a motivation for double effort. And in fact, failure gives us new knowledge. In fixed thinking, results are our identity, but in growth thinking, everything is effort, and our efforts form our identity. An educational point that we should pay attention to is that if a child achieves something and I tell them, "Well done, you're a genius," we develop fixed thinking in them. And if one day they fails at something, they concludes that because they're a genius, so of course they have some problems, and they'll feel weak and duplicitous. But in our way of thinking about growth, we tell children that regardless of any result, congratulations to you because you always try. Think about how much we're in the service of the attitude of growth. For example, Mozart definitely had good genes and talent for music, but we should know that Mozart wrote about 600 pieces by the age of 35. That is to say, out of his 600 pieces, only a few are very famous and masterpieces. Of course, all of them are beautiful and admirable. Beethoven wrote 650 pieces and Bach wrote 1,000 pieces of music. Absolutely, Picasso must have been a genius. But most of us don't know that he produced 1,800 paintings and 1,200 sculptures and 2,800 ceramic works. But only about 200 of his works are masterpieces and have changed the world. Please pay attention to this sentence. Quantity is the most predictable way to quality. If we want to create a masterpiece, we must first allow ourselves to have experiences that may not be masterpieces. But each of them makes the puzzle pieces of the masterpiece of our life complete. Certainly, Albert Einstein was a genius when he wrote about general relativity, but we must know that Einstein also has 248 other scientific papers, which may all complement each other. In fact, all of them were the basis for creating Albert Einstein's masterpieces and enduring theories. So let's think about how familiar we're with the concept of effort and failure in the path of our dreams. And how much do we allow ourselves to experience? If we want to reach the level of a master at something, we must devote at least 10,000 hours to it. We gotta focus on what we want to do, work hard, spend time, and maybe fail many times to reach the desired result. Are we spending this time on what we like and think we're talented in? What's your experience in this matter? The Japanese have a word called kaizen. Kaizen in Japanese means continuous improvement of a thing, work, or person. It means permanent and, of course, gradual improvement of something. Aristotle also distinguishes two models and philosophies of life from each other. One is a lifestyle based on having fun, which he named hedonic life. According to Aristotle, hedonic life is very primitive and vulgar, and its central core is fun and pleasure. But Aristotle names another type of life as authentic or eudaimonic life. He believes that eudaimonic life is based on psychological happiness, not pleasure. And he believes that this type of life is the result of the sufferings that we endure to reach true happiness. Certainly, material pleasures are our main fuel for striving to achieve our dreams. But we must know that sometimes happiness doesn't cross the path of pleasure, and this is very important. Sometimes we've to limit ourselves because of a goal to experience freedom and pleasure later. If our definition of being a genius is that we can achieve great things without effort, we should know that with this view we can never flourish our genius and talent. But if our definition of genius is a relentless pursuit of constant improvement, it's in that case that we think many of us can be geniuses and realize our greatest potential in the world. The resources of our human talent are like natural resources, that is, they're buried very deep. In fact, we've to communicate between two different worlds to show our talents: your inner world and your outer world. The connection point of these two worlds becomes our biggest influence in the world. Where we connect our inner world, that is our talents and characteristics, to a world that needs our voice, talent, and influence. If this connection occurs in our life, we'll find one of the main components of happiness and joy. Regarding knowing the inner world, we must say that different researchers realize that our learning styles are very different from each other. It means that some people are visual learners. If we try to teach this person chemistry through lectures, they'll never learn chemistry with the desired quality. That is to say, some learn by hearing, some by seeing, and some by doing. Sometimes we really like something, but the educational path we followed didn't match our spirit, and that is why we may feel that the activity isn't something that suits us when it isn't. An interesting example is Mr. Hans Zimmer, one of the greatest composers in the world. He has composed most of the movie soundtracks that we love, but he doesn't have much theoretical literacy in music. For example, it's said that he doesn't start composing a piece of music with a note tool, but with the help of a special intuition, he finds the main ideas of composing a piece of music. For example, when he comes across a melody, he imagines that the music needs more wood smell, or, for example, it needs a little bit more light. And it's this special and unique instinct that has made him one of the greatest composers in the world. Undoubtedly, Hans Zimmer is extraordinary and unique. But we want to say that if we wanted to measure Hans Zimmer's music in his youth with academic criteria, his genius and unique talent would probably not have been discovered. His style of learning and approach to music is different, and by the way, this difference is the point of distinction between him and others. I don't know what's your definition of genius, but we think if you pay attention a little bit, you can feel different sense in his songs, and see the light in his magical musical notes. Another thing we should talk about is the connection between genius and suffering. Suffering and genius are eternal allies of each other. There's a long list of people who endured a lot of mental and emotional suffering. Newton, Darwin, Galton, Freud, Balzac, Dostoevsky, Franz Kafka, Michael Ange, Modigliani, Hemingway, Jack London, Nietzsche, Alan Turing, Kierkegaard, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and many other geniuses. It seems all of them were suffering because of their intelligence. Suffering and genius are constant companions of each other and have a two-way connection. Both intelligence leads to suffering, and if we look at suffering correctly, suffering makes our genius flourish. When we examine the history of geniuses, we see that they were able to reach high levels and leave a deep impact, not despite their suffering, but because of their suffering. So we've to turn great sorrow and suffering into great work. It seems that when we talk about genius, part of our path passes by the walls of suffering. And the important question is, what's your greatest sorrow? Can you turn this great sadness into great work? The life of Mrs Saeedeh Ghods, the founder of the Mahak charity organization, who has made the world a better place for thousands of children with her genius and efforts, is a very good example.
The day my fate changed was an ordinary day like many other days. For me, that bad news was like a tsunami, and it took me a long time to realize that bad news isn't always inherently bad news. It always takes time to find out whether a news is good or bad. I always thought, what did I do to deserve my sweet little girl to get cancer? Anyway, all of us faced incredible and difficult moments in life, and we know that sometimes we've no choice but we must be patient and/or surrender. On the first day when I entered that hospital to treat my daughter, I realized how small I am. My feeling of anger didn't decrease, but I thought about how I used to pass by these cold and high walls for more than 30 years before that. But I didn't think about what was happening on the other side of the hospital walls. How long are these people waiting for a miracle and good news? Therefore, I decided to go and talk to them and take the first steps, and after that, all kinds of help poured towards me and us. What was the result? The result was that today in our country, no child with cancer will die because of poverty. Some people, like me in that time, are frozen in their mental world for a while because of the sudden terrible things that happen to them, and they don't even have time to think about the available opportunities. And there's nothing wrong with this, and there's nothing to blame. The path of life was like this for me, and I lived based on my genetics and family upbringing, to the extent that that incident made me alert and aware like a big blow. There are some people who think of a solution instead of regret and impression, which is a common habit for all of us. Some of us think that everyone is to blame for what happens to us except ourselves, but some others think differently. Or rather, instead of why, they think about how to get rid of that unfortunate situation. The most difficult step to get out of problems is the first step. And this has nothing to do with your education or your wealth. It just requires an inquiring mind. A mind that does not give in to problems and looks for a solution. And then you'll see that nothing can stop, and you also will become one of the miracle workers of the world. The only question we should ask ourselves today is, what will be my miracle in life?
Many of us have a talent that is different from what we do. Sometimes, due to the necessities of life and environmental conditions such as debts and family problems, we've to do something we don't like. We don't expect you to leave your current job if you're involved in these difficult and restrictive environmental conditions, because the necessities of life are very important. And sometimes we've to temporarily do an activity that we aren't interested in. But we want to say that we should always try to keep a part of our heart alive for that inner call. In The Simpsons animation, Homer, the main character of the story, leaves his hated job in a nuclear power plant to pursue his dream job in a bowling alley, because he loved it. But there's some problems. His wife is pregnant. The cost of living is high. He's economic problems, and because of this, he's forced to return to the power plant and beg his previous boss to accept him again. To punish him, his boss puts a sign on his office desk and writes on it that "Don't forget you're here forever." But at the end, the main character of the story, Homer, sticks his daughter's photos on the board in such a way that only this sentence remains: "Do it for her." We think this episode of The Simpsons shows us something like a book of philosophy, And that thing is that sometimes we don't like what we do, but maybe we can love the reason we do it. And sometimes the reason for doing that work isn't the work itself, but it's the people we love. All our effort in this episode was that despite all the problems, you still have a place in your heart for the dreams of the heart and innate abilities. Every day, spend as much time as you can on the inner voice of your heart and try to hear it. This episode doesn't end here. Rather, this episode just begins. Because this episode is made in the hope that after watching it, we'll try harder and braver to discover our talents. And in the hope that all of us will start the exciting path of our lives. Think about it. What reason is there to be afraid to start when we only have one chance to live on this planet? Now, the final question of this episode is, what's the reason that we don't start doing what we really like? Please share your comments with us. And thank you for staying with us till the end.